After dating for 5 years, my fiancé told me he wasn't sure about marrying me. Then he joked in front of his friends, "If you were prettier, I'd marry you." This morning, his mom called me in tears. Dominic and I have been together for just over 5 years, engaged for the last 8 months. We met through mutual friends at a housewarming party, just two people hitting it off over a shared hatred of IPAs and love for 90s cartoons. Our relationship progressed at a comfortable pace, dating for a year, moving in together after 2, adopting our cat, Beans, at 3, and getting engaged last summer. The proposal wasn't extravagant, just a Saturday morning hike to our favorite lookout point, where he nervously fumbled the ring box out of his pocket. I said yes immediately. We set the date for this October and have been slowly planning everything. Well, mostly me planning while he nodded along. About 3 months ago, Dominic started making odd comments when we discussed wedding plans. Nothing outright negative, just hesitant. When I showed him potential venues, he'd say things like, "That's a lot of money for just one day," or, "Do we really need to invite all those people?" I brushed it off as typical guy behavior or budget concerns. Then came the delayed responses to my texts about wedding stuff. I'd send him options for caterers, and he'd reply hours later with just "looks fine" or "whatever you want." When I asked if everything was okay, he'd say he was just busy at work. His construction company had taken on some big projects, so it made sense. Last month, he started going out more with his work friend Paul. They'd grab beers after work or watch games at Paul's place. Again, nothing unusual, just more frequent than before. When he'd come home, he seemed distant, checking his phone more often and being less affectionate. I tried talking to my best friend Lena about it. She suggested pre-wedding jitters and recommended we have a date night to reconnect. So last Friday, I made reservations at this new Italian place downtown, put on a nice dress, not too fancy, just something I hadn't worn in a while, and even bought Dominic's favorite beer to have waiting in the fridge. The date night was a disaster. He seemed distracted throughout dinner, barely engaging in conversation. When I brought up finalizing our honeymoon plans, he dropped the bomb. He wasn't sure if he was ready for all this. Not just the honeymoon, but the wedding, marriage, everything. I was stunned. 5 years together, 8 months engaged, and now he wasn't sure. When I pressed him, he mentioned conversations with Paul about how marriage changes things and referenced Paul's brother's messy divorce. The discussion quickly escalated, with me trying not to cause a scene in the restaurant while feeling like my world was collapsing. We barely touched our entrees. The ride home was silent, thick with tension. At our apartment, he deflected further conversation, saying he needed time to think before sleeping on the couch. The next morning was painfully awkward. We moved around each other like strangers sharing an Airbnb. He mentioned meeting Paul and some work friends for lunch to watch the game at the Rusty Nail, the sports bar downtown. I was too emotionally drained to argue. A few hours later, Lena called and convinced me to get out of the apartment. We went for coffee and I unloaded everything. Lena listened patiently, suggesting that maybe Dominic was just experiencing normal pre-wedding anxiety. After coffee, we wandered around Target aimlessly, my usual stress relief activity. I bought some unnecessary throw pillows and new shampoo, because retail therapy is still therapy, right? By early evening, I felt calmer and decided to head home. I was pulling into our apartment complex when I got a text from Kylar, one of Dominic's coworkers I'd met at the company Christmas party. The message asked if I was okay, mentioning that things got weird at the Rusty Nail. I called Kylar instead of texting back. He sounded uncomfortable, initially reluctant to share details. With some pressing, he finally revealed what happened. The guys had been giving Dominic a hard time about wedding planning, and when Paul asked if he was ready to be with one woman forever, Dominic expressed doubts about the wedding timing. When Paul asked what was holding him back, Dominic, who was apparently drunk, said something like, "If you were prettier, I'd be more excited about marrying you." Then he laughed it off like it was a joke. Kylar told me he and some other guys called Dominic out for the comment, but Dominic just got defensive and said they couldn't take a joke. I sat in my car crying for 20 minutes after that call. The man I'd loved for 5 years, who I thought loved me, had publicly joked about my appearance being the reason he was hesitant to marry me. When I finally went inside, Dominic was passed out on the couch, still in his clothes from earlier. The apartment smelled like stale beer. I took Beans into the bedroom with me and locked the door. Sunday morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee and bacon, Dominic's standard apology breakfast. He looked hungover and sheepish, clearly hoping food would smooth things over. When I confronted him about what Kylar had told me, his face fell. He immediately tried to downplay it, claiming he was drunk and being stupid. According to him, the guys were ragging on him about being tied down, and he'd said something dumb to shut them up. His defense of guys being guys only made things worse. We argued about how he could humiliate me in front of his friends, with him insisting that wasn't his intention. He tried to explain that he was stressed about wedding costs and pressure, but I couldn't get past the fact that he'd used my appearance as the punchline to a cruel joke. I couldn't stay in the apartment with him. I grabbed my purse and headed for Elliot's place. My brother has always been my safe harbor during rough times. When I told him what happened, he was furious, ready to confront Dominic directly. I managed to calm him down, explaining that I just needed space and a place to stay while figuring things out. Throughout Sunday, Dominic kept texting apologies and pleas to come home and talk. I responded only once, saying I needed time. I called in sick to work on Monday, unable to face answering phones at the dental office while pretending everything was fine. Around 9 a.m. Monday morning, I got a call from Valerie, Dominic's mom. We've always gotten along well. She's been more supportive of our relationship than my own mother, who lives in Florida with husband number 3. She sounded upset, saying Dominic had called her the night before, and there was something important I needed to know. She asked if we could meet somewhere to talk, and that's where I am now. Sitting in my car outside the coffee shop where I'm supposed to meet Valerie in 15 minutes, wondering what else there could possibly be to know, and if my 5-year relationship is completely over. I never thought I'd be writing this post. I keep looking at my engagement ring, wondering if I should have seen this coming. Was I blind, or did things really change this suddenly? Should I hear Valerie out? What could she possibly tell me that would make any of this okay? First update. First, thank you all for the overwhelming support on my original post. I didn't expect thousands of comments. I tried to read as many as I could between crying sessions and stress eating the emergency Oreos from my brother's pantry. For those asking, yes, I met with Valerie, Dominic's mom, and I'll get to that at the end of this update. A lot has happened in the last 2 days, and I'm still processing everything. After posting on Monday, I called in sick to work again. My boss was understanding. I've only used 2 sick days in the past year, and apparently I sounded like death on the phone. I spent most of the morning in Elliot's spare room/storage closet, scrolling through your comments and trying to gather my thoughts. Around noon, Lena came over on her lunch break with sandwiches from that deli near the hospital where she works. I hadn't eaten much since Sunday, so even though I wasn't hungry, I forced myself to take a few bites. Lena gently reminded me that I couldn't avoid Dominic forever. We lived together, had joint accounts, and eventually would need to talk. She was right, obviously. I couldn't hide at my brother's place indefinitely, especially since Elliot's girlfriend was coming over for dinner that night. The last thing I wanted was to be the sad third wheel at their Taco Tuesday. After Lena left, I took a shower, borrowed one of Elliot's hoodies, don't judge, it was comforting, and drove back to my apartment. The whole way there, I rehearsed what I wanted to say. I wasn't going to yell, I wasn't going to cry, I was going to be calm and mature and get answers. When I pulled into our parking spot, I noticed Dominic's truck was there. He should have been at work. My stomach nodded as I walked up the stairs to our second-floor unit. I unlocked the door to find him on the couch in sweats, looking like he hadn't slept. Surrounded by wedding planning binders that I'd put together over the last 8 months, Beans was curled up next to him, the little traitor. He seemed surprised and relieved to see me. When I asked why he wasn't at work, he mentioned taking personal time. He'd apparently been looking through all the wedding plans, trying to figure out how he messed up so badly. I remained standing by the door, not ready to sit next to him, and told him that looking at wedding plans wasn't going to fix what he'd said. What followed was a long, difficult conversation. He apologized again for the bar comment, calling it inexcusable and claiming he didn't even believe it. When I asked why he would say something he didn't believe, he explained he was trying to look cool in front of his friends, a response that only made me angrier. I brought up his comments at dinner before the bar incident, reminding him that he'd expressed doubts about our wedding even when sober. He admitted to feeling stressed about multiple things, a work project falling behind schedule, Paul's constant marriage horror stories, and anxiety about our wedding budget. But instead of talking to me about these concerns, he'd bottled everything up until it exploded in the worst possible way. As our conversation progressed, he revealed something new, fears about turning into his father. Dominic rarely talked about his dad, who left when he was 12 after having an affair with a coworker and moving to Arizona to start a new family. Although Dominic had always insisted it didn't affect him much, he now confessed that he worried about having some genetic predisposition to cheat or abandon his family. I pointed out that he wasn't his father, and that genetics don't determine relationship choices. His response was telling. He wondered if he could really promise forever, when forever seemed so impossible based on what he'd witnessed growing up. When I asked if he'd discussed these fears with anyone else, he hesitated before admitting he'd been talking to Kyler sometimes. Apparently, they'd gotten closer since Kyler joined the company, and Kyler had gone through some relationship stuff too. I connected this to why Kyler had called me about the bar incident. He already knew about Dominic's doubts. The conversation took another difficult turn when I asked exactly what Dominic had been feeling. His answer was painfully honest. Scared, overwhelmed, and uncertain about marriage despite loving me. He explained that he kept thinking about how his parents seemed happy until suddenly they weren't, and he feared creating the same situation with us. I asked why he hadn't shared these feelings sooner. He claimed he was afraid I'd think he didn't love me enough. The irony wasn't lost on me. By hiding his fears, he'd created exactly the situation he was trying to avoid. When I questioned whether his joke about my appearance came from a real place of unattraction, he insisted he'd always found me attractive. He referenced our first meeting at the housewarming party, mentioning specific details about my green sweater and his terrible beer pong skills. According to him, the comment came from insecurity and a misguided attempt to seem in control in front of his friends, rather than appearing trapped. As we continued talking, I asked a crucial question. Were his doubts about marriage in general or about marrying me specifically? His hesitation before answering told me everything. He finally admitted that while his fears were primarily about marriage and commitment, part of him wondered if we were right for each other long term. This hurt more than the appearance comment. 5 years together, and he was still wondering if we were right for each other. When I pressed for specifics, he mentioned how we'd both changed since our early 20s. My increased need for planning versus my former spontaneity, his abandoned dreams of starting his own business. Although I pointed out that growth and change are normal in relationships, he questioned whether we'd grown together or apart. By this point, I felt emotionally drained. I told him I needed time away to process everything, his public humiliation, his hidden doubts, and now his uncertainty about our compatibility. He pleaded for us to work through it together, offering to try therapy or couples counseling, but I remained firm about needing space. As I was about to pack more clothes, he mentioned my phone had been buzzing. I checked and saw 3 missed calls from Valerie. With everything happening, I'd completely forgotten our planned coffee meeting. When I mentioned this to Dominic, his expression changed to confusion, then concern. He asked what his mom wanted to talk about, and I explained she'd called crying the previous morning, saying she needed to discuss something important after his Sunday night call to her. His reaction was telling. The color drained from his face, and he wouldn't meet my eyes. When I asked what he'd told her, he vaguely mentioned their fight and his doubts, but his evasiveness made me suspicious. When pressed further, he said it wasn't his place to explain, and suggested I should hear whatever it was from his mom directly. I stepped away to call Valerie back. She answered immediately, concerned when I hadn't shown up for our meeting. I explained I was at the apartment talking with Dominic. She mentioned having something important to tell me and suggested meeting right away. Her voice sounded strained when I mentioned being with Dominic, further increasing my suspicion that there was something significant I didn't know. After arranging to meet Valerie in 30 minutes, I confronted Dominic again, asking what his mother knew that I didn't. He finally looked up, his expression a mix of guilt and resignation. He said there was something he should have told me himself and suggested I talk to his mom, offering to be gone when I returned if that's what I wanted. I quickly packed enough clothes for a week, along with toiletries and my laptop. At the door, Dominic said he loved me, but I responded that sometimes love isn't enough. On my way to meet Valerie, Karina, Dominic's sister, called. She was clearly concerned, asking what was happening between Dominic and me. She mentioned hearing from Paul about the bar incident and noted that Dominic wasn't answering her text while our mom seemed upset. When I explained I was heading to meet Valerie, Karina seemed surprised and asked if the meeting was about Maria. The name hit me like a truck. What about Maria? I asked. Karina's shocked reaction and quick backpedaling told me she'd accidentally revealed something important. She apologized and urged me to hear Valerie out, refusing to explain further despite my pressing. As I pulled into the coffee shop parking lot, I spotted Valerie already waiting at a table by the window. Her eyes were red-rimmed and puffy. Whatever she was about to tell me, I had a feeling it was going to change everything. My phone buzzed with a text as I walked toward her table. It was from Dominic. "Whatever my mom tells you, please remember that I do love you. I just got scared and made terrible mistakes. I'll understand if you can't forgive me." I put my phone away, took a deep breath, and sat down across from Valerie. Second update. Thank you all for the support on my previous posts. Reading your comments has been both comforting and overwhelming. I haven't been able to respond to many, but please know I've read them and appreciate the advice. I'm writing this from a new location, Lena's apartment. After meeting with Valerie yesterday, I couldn't face going back to Elliot's or our apartment. Lena has a pull-out couch that's slightly more comfortable than Elliot's storage room futon. Plus her cat Pepper doesn't judge me for crying into my cereal at 2 a.m. So, the meeting with Valerie. Where do I even start? The coffee shop was busy for a Tuesday afternoon. Some local community college had just let out classes, and students with laptops occupied most tables. Valerie had managed to snag a corner booth, the kind with high backs that create at least the illusion of privacy. She looked different than the last time I'd seen her, at our monthly family dinner 3 weeks ago. Her usually perfect bob was slightly disheveled, and she wasn't wearing any makeup. In the 5 years I've known her, I've never seen Valerie without at least mascara and lipstick. She's not vain, it's just her routine, like how some people can't start their day without coffee. When I arrived, she stood to hug me. She smelled like those lavender dryer sheets she always uses. I ordered a black coffee, even though what I really wanted was one of those sugary caramel things with extra whipped cream. Somehow it felt wrong to order something frivolous for this conversation. After some awkward small talk, Valerie got to the point. Dominic had called her Sunday night in a complete emotional meltdown. While she acknowledged his fears about commitment and turning into his father were real, there was something much more immediate causing his behavior. Maria. I nearly choked on my coffee. Maria? The new project coordinator at Dominic's company? The woman he'd mentioned a few times in passing? As Valerie explained, while nervously shredding a napkin into tiny pieces, Dominic had developed feelings for Maria over the past few months. Nothing physical had happened, at least according to what Dominic told his mother. But there was an emotional connection that had him questioning everything about our relationship. I sat there trying to process this information, feeling like the coffee shop was tilting sideways. While Valerie continued talking, I was mentally connecting dots, building a timeline. Maria had started at Dominic's company around New Year's. I'd met her briefly at the company holiday party in March. By then, Dominic had already been acting different, more distant, checking his phone constantly, spending more time with work friends. What I'd written off as stress from his big project now looked like something else entirely. When I asked Valerie why she was telling me this instead of protecting her son, her eyes welled up. The parallel to her own marriage breakdown became clear as she shared more details. Before Dominic's father left for Arizona with his coworker, there had been months of distance, hurtful comments, and manufactured arguments, all designed to create distance rather than admit the truth. She didn't want to see history repeat itself, with me left in the dark while Dominic took the coward's way out. The comment at the bar suddenly made more sense. Not just drunken stupidity, but a subconscious attempt to sabotage our relationship so he wouldn't have to make the hard choice himself. We talked for over an hour. Valerie shared more about her own experience, how she'd tried to save her marriage even after learning about the affair, how she'd blamed herself for not being enough. Before we parted ways in the parking lot, she said something that's been echoing in my head ever since. The hardest lesson I learned was that you can't make someone choose you. They either do or they don't, and anything in between is just delaying the inevitable. I sat in my car for a long time afterward, staring at my phone. There were 3 new texts from Dominic, all variations of "I'm sorry" and "I love you," but not a single mention of Maria, still hiding the full truth. Instead of responding to him, I called Lena and asked if I could crash at her place. She didn't hesitate or ask questions, just said she was already making up the pull-out couch and offered to pick up dinner on her way home. That's the kind of friend everyone deserves during a crisis. I finally texted Dominic back. "I know about Maria. Don't contact me again until you're ready to tell me the complete truth. I'll be collecting more of my things tomorrow while you're at work." Then I blocked his number. Not permanently, just for the night. I needed space to think without his explanations or justifications. On the drive to Lena's, Karina called. The conversation confirmed what Valerie had told me and added another layer. She had overheard Dominic and Paul discussing the situation last Thursday. She'd confronted her brother and made him promise to be honest with me after the weekend. Clearly, he'd failed to follow through on that promise. What surprised me most was Karina's unwavering support. Despite being Dominic's sister, she made it clear she was on my side in this situation. The relief I felt was enormous. I'd been worried about losing not just Dominic but his entire family, who had become my family over the years. Lena's apartment was exactly what I needed that night. A neutral space where I could just exist without explaining myself. We ate Thai food on her living room floor. Her coffee table was covered with papers from her online class. While watching a baking competition, neither of us really followed. The mundane normality of it was like a life preserver in the middle of my emotional storm. After Lena went to bed, I stayed up scrolling through photos on my phone. 5 years of memories with Dominic, vacations, holidays, random selfies on ordinary days. Our engagement photos showed us grinning like we'd won the lottery. I was making mental plans for the next day, going to the apartment while Dominic was at work, packing more things, maybe talking to the landlord about breaking our lease, when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Margot, this is Maria. I know you blocked Dominic. Can we meet tomorrow? There's more to the story that you should know. Just the 2 of us." I stared at the message for a long time, my heart pounding. What more could there possibly be? And why would this woman want to tell me directly? After what felt like an hour but was probably only minutes, I typed a response. Where and when? Third update. First, thank you all for the overwhelming support on my previous posts. I've been reading your comments during sleepless nights, and they've helped more than you know. For those asking how I'm doing, I'm surviving. Some moments are easier than others. The meeting with Maria happened, and it went nothing like I expected. We met at this little breakfast place near the park. Neutral territory, I guess. When I arrived, she was already there, nervously scrolling through her phone. She looked different than I remembered from the company party. Less polished, more human somehow. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she wore minimal makeup. What surprised me immediately was how uncomfortable she seemed. If she'd been having some secret emotional affair with my fiancé, shouldn't she have been more confident? Instead, she kept fidgeting with her coffee cup. avoiding eye contact. The conversation revealed two major bombshells. First, Maria had no idea Dominic had developed feelings for her until Paul mentioned it casually last week. According to her, she and Dominic had worked closely on a project, occasionally texting about work after hours, but nothing that crossed any lines from her perspective. She'd never flirted with him or encouraged anything beyond friendship. She showed me their text history, mostly work stuff, occasional memes, nothing romantic or inappropriate. She even had a boyfriend of 3 years who sometimes joined their group for happy hours. The second revelation was about Paul. Apparently, he'd been deliberately stirring things up. Maria had overheard him at work encouraging Dominic to explore his options before settling down, specifically mentioning her as someone who gets Dominic better than I do. She explained that Paul had been telling everyone at work that Dominic was having cold feet about the wedding, making jokes about him being trapped, and missing out on his freedom. By the end of our meeting, I felt strangely calm. Maria wasn't the villain I'd imagined. She was just a bystander caught in Paul's manipulation and Dominic's weakness. Before we parted ways, she said something that stuck with me. "You seem like someone who knows their worth. Don't let anyone make you question it." I left that meeting with a new perspective and a plan. This wasn't just about Dominic and me anymore. It was about Paul's toxic influence, Dominic's family history, and where I fit into all of it. I texted Karina afterward, asking if she'd help arrange a family meeting at her apartment, neutral territory since I wasn't ready to be alone with Dominic yet. She agreed immediately. That brings me to yesterday's dinner. Karina had set everything up in her small but cozy apartment. She'd ordered food from that Italian place near her building. Nothing fancy, just pasta and salad. Valerie arrived first, then Paul. Karina had insisted he attend. And finally Dominic, who looked like he hadn't slept in days. The first 20 minutes were excruciating. We all sat around Karina's dining table, pushing pasta around our plates, making strange small talk about the weather and Karina's new coffee table. The elephant in the room was practically stealing food off our plates, but no one wanted to be the first to acknowledge it. Finally, Valerie broke the silence by stating bluntly that we weren't there for a social gathering, but to address what had been happening and find a way forward. That opened the floodgates. I shared what I'd learned from Maria, watching Paul's face carefully as I spoke. The way his expression shifted from confusion to defensiveness told me everything. He tried to interrupt, claiming he was just looking out for his friend, but Karina shut him down immediately. Dominic mostly sat in silence, staring at his barely touched pasta. When directly addressed, he admitted that Maria had just been friendly, but he'd built it into something else because he was scared of turning into his dad. Valerie visibly flinched at that comment. When I brought up the joke at the bar, Dominic looked genuinely ashamed. He admitted it had nothing to do with Maria. It was just him being a coward. Paul was giving him a hard time about being whipped, and instead of standing up for our relationship, he'd said something horrible to seem cool. According to Dominic, it was never about my looks. Paul tried to dismiss it all as just guy talk, but Karina reminded everyone that Dominic and I were supposed to get married in 3 months. That simple statement, the reminder of our rapidly approaching wedding date, hit me like a physical blow. The save the dates had gone out, deposits had been paid, my dress was hanging in Lena's spare closet waiting for final alterations. That's when I quietly said I didn't think the wedding was happening anymore. The room went silent. Dominic started to protest, but I cut him off. I explained how I'd spent the last week trying to understand how we got here. What I'd realized was that this wasn't just about Maria or that joke, or even Paul's toxic influence. This was about Dominic not being honest, with me or himself. I told them how I'd ignored the signs for months, his disinterest in wedding planning, his increased time with Paul, his emotional distance. I'd made excuses because it was easier than confronting the truth, but I deserved someone who was certain about me, someone who didn't need a family intervention to figure out their feeling. Paul made a snarky comment about me being dramatic, which earned him simultaneous shut-up responses from both Valerie and Karina. Dominic insisted he was certain about loving me, just scared of messing everything up. I pointed out that he already had. The conversation continued for hours. There were tears, heated words, especially between Karina and Paul, and difficult truths. We rehashed old wounds and uncovered new ones. Around midnight, when everyone was emotionally exhausted, we reached the inevitable conclusion. The wedding was off. Our 5-year relationship had run its course. It wasn't a screaming match or a dramatic exit. It was a mutual recognition that something fundamental had broken between us. Trust. Maybe it could be rebuilt eventually, but not in time for an October wedding. Not with Maria still working at Dominic's company. Not with the echo of that joke still hanging between us. Karina drove me back to Lena's place afterward, assuring me this didn't change my relationship with her or Valerie. According to her, I was still family to them, regardless of what happened with Dominic. When I got back to Lena's apartment, I sat on the pull-out couch in the dark, letting the reality wash over me. 5 years, gone. Wedding, canceled, future, unknown. I didn't cry right away. Instead, I made a list in the Notes app on my phone. Call venue to cancel. Deposit probably gone. Return ring. Contact guests. Move out of apartment. Change relationship status on social media. It was past 2 a.m. when Lena shuffled out from her bedroom. She'd heard me come in and wanted to check if I was okay. When I told her the wedding was off, she simply sat beside me on the pull-out and put her arm around my shoulders. We sat like that until sunrise, not saying much, just existing in the strangeness of my new reality. This morning, I woke up to a text from Dominic asking if we could meet to discuss practical matters. The apartment lease, separating our finances, what to do with the furniture we bought together. So adult, so final. I also had a message from Elliot asking when he should come over to help pack my things. My brother, always practical, and one from my mom, who'd somehow heard through the grapevine, probably from one of my cousins who follows Karina on Instagram, and wanted to know if she should cancel her flight for the wedding. The ring feels heavy on my finger now. I've been twisting it absently, a nervous habit I didn't realize I had. It's a simple design, a round diamond in a white gold setting, nothing flashy or elaborate. Dominic had chosen it because it was classic, like our relationship. The irony isn't lost on me. I called the venue this morning. The coordinator was sympathetic but firm. The deposit is non-refundable this close to the date. $8,000 down the drain. Money we'd saved for over a year, cutting back on vacations and new clothes and dinners out. The practical side of me winces at the waste. The emotional side doesn't care about money right now. Karina texted that she'd found a photographer who might be willing to transfer our deposit to another event in the future. Valerie offered to help contact family members about the cancellation to spare me the awkward conversations. Small kindnesses in the aftermath. Paul, unsurprisingly, sent a non-apology text about how these things happen for a reason, and how I'd find someone better suited, eventually. I deleted it without responding. Maria sent a short message expressing her regret about the situation and assuring me again that nothing happened between them. I believe her, strangely enough. She seems like collateral damage in this mess. A convenient projection for Dominic's fears and Paul's manipulation. The hardest part is the mundane reminders. The wedding planning binder still sitting in my tote bag. The shared Spotify playlist we'd been building for the reception. The honeymoon research folder on my laptop. Little pieces of a future that no longer exists. Lena suggested I take a mental health day from work, but I decided to go in. Sitting at home scrolling through Reddit and overthinking everything seemed worse than the distraction of answering phones and filing insurance claims. My coworkers have been mercifully normal. Either they don't know yet, or they're politely pretending not to notice my puffy eyes and absent engagement ring. I'm meeting Dominic tomorrow at a coffee shop to exchange keys and discuss the apartment. He's agreed to move out since my name is on the lease, and he can stay with his cousin temporarily. Another practical conversation in the business of dismantling a relationship. Part of me still can't believe this is happening. Last month we were debating reception songs and testing cake flavors. Now we're dividing up kitchen appliances and deciding who keeps the PlayStation. I keep thinking about something Valerie said at the dinner. Endings are rarely clean or perfect. Most of the time they're messy and sad and complicated. She would know. She rebuilt her life after Dominic's father left, raised 2 kids alone, found happiness again eventually. Looking at her now, you'd never guess she went through something so painful. Maybe there's hope in that. For now, I'm taking it one day at a time. Tomorrow, I'll handle the apartment and finances. Next week, I'll start looking for my own place. The future beyond that is blurry, but it exists. Karina just texted to ask if I want to meet for coffee this weekend. She mentioned that her family friend Kenzo, an older gentleman who's known their family forever, offered his vacation cabin if I need a getaway to clear my head. The support from Dominic's family is unexpected, but deeply appreciated. I haven't decided if I'll take Kenzo up on his offer. Part of me wants to escape somewhere quiet to process everything. Another part knows I need my support system right now. Lena with her practical compassion, Elliot with his protective big brother energy, even Valerie and Karina with their complicated loyalty. What I do know is that I won't be checking my wedding countdown app anymore, won't be pinning reception decor ideas, or practicing a new signature with Dominic's last name. That future is gone. And while I don't know what comes next, I'm starting to believe there will be something. Last update. It feels strange to be writing this final update from my new apartment. It's been 3 months since the family dinner that ended my engagement. 3 months of piecing my life back together in ways I never expected. Some of you have sent messages asking for an update, so here it is. The good, the bad, and the unexpected. First, the practical stuff. Dominic moved out of our shared apartment within a week of our breakup. Elliot and Lena helped me pack up his things while he was at work, leaving them neatly labeled in the living room for him to collect. It was surreal, separating 5 years of shared existence into his and mine. The coffee maker he'd gotten for his birthday, the throw blanket I'd bought on our weekend trip to that little mountain town, the framed photos we'd hung on every wall. The apartment felt hollow afterward, like a stage set rather than a home. I lasted 2 more weeks there before the lease manager agreed to let me break the contract with an extra month's payment. It was worth the money to escape the ghost of our relationship that lingered in every room. Finding a new place was harder than expected. The rental market is brutal right now, and my budget as a single person is considerably tighter. I ended up in a smaller 1-bedroom across town, further from work, but with a tiny balcony where I've started growing herbs in dollar store pots. The basil keeps dying, but the mint is thriving against all odds. I choose to see that as symbolic. Financially, it's been an adjustment. Our shared expenses were suddenly all on me. Car insurance, streaming services, even groceries seem more expensive when you're cooking for one. I've become that person who uses coupons and buys store brands, tracks expenses in a spreadsheet, and thinks twice before ordering takeout. Growing up stuff I never thought I'd have to learn at 29. The wedding vendors were surprisingly understanding. The venue kept our deposit, but sent a kind note hoping I'd find happiness. The florist refunded half our payment despite their no refund policy. The DJ recommended his brother who works at a therapy center. An unexpected but thoughtful gesture. The engagement ring sits in my dresser drawer in its original box. Dominic said I should keep it or sell it, that it was bad karma for him to take it back. I haven't decided what to do with it yet. Some days I forget it's there. Other days I open the box and stare at it, wondering how something so small could have represented such big promises. Social media was its own special hell. I waited 2 weeks before changing my relationship status, dreading the flood of questions. When I finally did it, at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, the notifications poured in anyway. Well-meaning friends with their "what happened" messages, distant relatives offering prayers, former classmates I hadn't spoken to in years, suddenly sliding into my DMs with faux concern that felt more like curiosity. I posted a brief, vague statement about mutual decisions and requesting privacy, then muted notifications and threw my phone across the couch. Later, I posted a single photo of my new apartment keys with the caption, "New Beginnings." It got fewer likes than my engagement announcement, but felt more genuine somehow. Now, about Dominic. We've spoken a handful of times since the breakup, mostly about practical matters. Mail that came to the wrong address, the shared cloud storage account we forgot to separate, returning a borrowed air fryer to his sister. Each conversation has been civil but strained, like acquaintances forced to make small talk in an elevator. He's still working at the same company, still friends with Paul, though Karina tells me they've had some falling out recently, still living at his cousin's place. According to the grapevine, aka Karina, the situation with Maria got awkward after our breakup. She requested a transfer to a different team and has been cold toward him since learning the full story. The biggest surprise came last month when Dominic texted asking if we could meet. We hadn't seen each other face to face since the key exchange at the apartment, and part of me was curious what he wanted. We met at a coffee shop near my new place, neutral territory with plenty of witnesses, as Lena half-jokingly suggested. He looked different, thinner, with darker circles under his eyes, wearing a shirt I didn't recognize. The first 10 minutes were stilted small talk about work and weather. Then he pulled out a journal. "I've been seeing someone," he said, and my heart did a weird little stutter before he clarified, "A therapist, I mean." The journal was part of his therapy, daily reflections on patterns and behaviors he wanted to change. He'd been examining his relationship with his father, his friendship with Paul, and the way he treated me. He didn't ask for forgiveness or reconciliation. He just wanted me to know he was working on himself. I should have done this years ago, he admitted. Maybe things would have been different. It was the most self-aware I'd ever seen him, and I found myself genuinely hoping therapy would help him. Not for my sake, that ship has sailed, but because carrying around that much unresolved family trauma seemed exhausting. Before we parted ways, he mentioned he'd heard I was still close with his mom and sister. I'm glad, he said. They need good people in their lives. That's been one of the strangest parts of this breakup. Maintaining relationships with Dominic's family while disconnecting from him. Valerie texts me weekly, usually sending funny memes or updates about her garden. Karina and I have breakfast every other Sunday at this little diner halfway between our apartments. They've been careful not to put me in uncomfortable positions or share too much about Dominic, respecting the boundaries I've set. As for me personally, I'd like to say I've had some profound awakening, that I've found myself through this heartbreak. The reality is messier. Some days I feel liberated, relieved that I didn't marry someone who could hurt me so carelessly. Other days, usually when my hot water heater acts up, or I can't reach something on the top shelf that Dominic would have grabbed for me, I miss the practical comforts of partnership. I've started therapy too, not because of the breakup specifically, but because it made me realize how much I'd compromised myself in that relationship, how many red flags I'd ignored because they came wrapped in the comfort of familiarity, how much of myself I'd set aside to make room for Dominic's needs and insecurities. My therapist suggested I reclaim some parts of myself that got lost along the way. I've resumed hiking on Saturday mornings, something I'd stopped doing because Dominic always complained about early wake-ups on weekends. Dating again feels like a distant concept, though my colleagues have started making noises about setting me up with this great guy they know. I'm not ready. Maybe in a few more months, maybe longer. Right now, I'm still learning how to be comfortable in my own company. The most unexpected development came from what should have been the saddest task, canceling our honeymoon. We'd booked a 10-day trip to the coast, renting a little cottage with a deck overlooking the water. Non-refundable, of course. For weeks, I ignored the reminder in my calendar, unable to face losing that deposit too. Then Lena suggested something radical. Take the trip anyway. By myself. You've never traveled alone, she pointed out. Maybe it's time. The idea terrified me at first. 10 days alone in a romantic cottage meant for two? It sounded like the setup for a sad indie film, but the more I thought about it, the more appealing it became. I could wake up when I wanted, explore without compromising, read an entire book in one sitting if I felt like it. So that's where I'm headed next week, to a honeymoon cottage, solo. I've packed 3 paperbacks, downloaded some podcasts, and splurged on a new swimsuit that I chose entirely for comfort, rather than how it looked to someone else. My mom thinks I'm crazy. Elliot offered to come with me for part of the time. I declined. Karina suggested I download a dating app, just to see who's out there. Maybe, but probably not. I don't know what I'll find on this non-honeymoon honeymoon. Maybe clarity, maybe more questions. Definitely some sunburn, knowing my luck with sunscreen. The other day I was grocery shopping when our song came on over the store speakers. 3 months ago, it would have sent me hiding in the frozen food section, fighting back tears. This time I just felt a slight twinge, like pressing on a bruise that's mostly healed. Progress, not perfection. I'm not going to pretend I've got everything figured out. My new apartment's shower has mysterious temperature fluctuations. I killed another basil plant yesterday. I still occasionally grab my phone to text Dominic about something funny before remembering we don't do that anymore.